It's just me now.
Jim, can you guys hear me now?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jim. Welcome, my friend. Hi,
Okay.
everyone. Man, Discord is so bugged. The person who starts the stage is automatically muted and can't speak, so I need to leave the stage and come back to be able to talk. This is so crazy. How is everyone doing? I see a few legends. Katir, Ars, Tango Mike, Stick, VB, Amanoch, Neo, Tango Mike, Bob, Sharkbait, Flares, Shadow Moon, Shiftblade, Sviku, Tom Led. Welcome everyone. We have a very, very, very special episode for today's brew.
Hopefully, I can live up to that.
I mean, Jim, we are still suffering from Santi leaving us. As you guys can
Yeah.
imagine, my heart is broken. Alpha
Zinc
Punk
master.
said he wanted a child
Yeah.
from Santi.
Yeah. Santi. Yeah, I know it is sad.
Macedon, please don't kill Santi. We still
Yes,
love
please
Santi.
don't. Very much love for the Santi.
Yeah, I mean, Santi is my brother. Like, we have been together here in Star Atlas trenches since pretty much the beginning of Star Atlas. The chat is that chat's so funny. But
You gotta love it. So distracting. Like
yeah,
when I'm
exactly.
talking, I might not actually have the chat open, guys, because I'm
Yes,
like a
yes.
squirrel, man. I see
Let,
that stuff coming. I'm like, what? So
yeah. Don't worry, Jim. I'll take care of the chat for us. But we wanted to start this brew by talking a little bit about Santi. I mean, our boy has decided to start his own enterprise, and he's creating a new business with a childhood friend, chasing his dreams. And even though I'm sad, really sad, because I'll miss him in the daily operations, Santi is not completely gone from Star Atlas. He's still here as an advisor, but he'll be mostly out of the day-to-day operations. So, for example, Santi won't be coming more to the brews. Maybe he'll join once in a while, but yeah, he's chasing his dreams, building his new company, and the only thing that we can do is wish him luck because he's an extraordinary human being, a great friend, a great brother, and I'm sure he'll be successful in whatever endeavor he wants to go. That's for sure. But for us here in Star Atlas, it is business as usual. The metaverse waits for no one. And we have something big here that we are building. And I have found new partners, new members to be part of the Brew family. And one of them is here on stage with us today. I want you guys to welcome Jim Carter, Visual GC, Web Director of Star Atlas, and he'll be a recurrent member of the Atlas Brew now because, I mean, we always dreamed to have a direct bridge with the Star Atlas development team. Now we got the guy who oversees it all. We got the guy who is building Zinc, who is building C4, and he'll be here with us talking about Star Atlas, collecting feedback directly from you guys, explaining the processes, explaining the development, everything that we have been building so far. Now we have someone actually technical that can bridge us between my total lack of knowledge on development and having the vision of the community, the passion of the community, the feedback that you guys always provide us, I think it will be super fruitful. It's going to be extremely engaging. Jim will be able to explain every aspect of every product, every barrier, every bump in the road. No pressure, Jim, but
No pressure at all. Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
we are
Oh,
happy to have you here.
Dom's on vacation. I just saw that fly through. So Dom's on vacation right now. Dom.
Yeah, Dominic Vane is on vacations. He'll be back with us, I think, next week. So you guys will be able to bother him real life. Don't worry, he's coming back. But meanwhile, the show must go on. And for today's show, I decided that we were all a little bit too sad to see Santi go, a little bit needing a little bit of a shake, like some energy. I wanted us to have fun and discuss something that we are looking forward. And today we are going to talk about C4. We are going to talk about the PTR and some of the most groundbreaking stuff that Automata is bringing on stage this year. So, without further ado, I'll start this brew by asking my friend here, Jim. Jim, what is the PTR and what's coming with C4 PTR?
Yeah. So great question. PTR, I mean, it's really easy to think of it as like public test release, but it's not. It's ultimately this concept that came out of Blizzard called public test realm, with the idea that as a development team, as a game development team, we're going to put features, kind of new features, in a test environment that the public can access. Um, excuse me, that the public can access, so that we can get feedback, we can test new systems, and before they become, you know codified in in the game itself, we have a spot for people to test them and to play them. And one of the things that's really important with Star Atlas, as much as we would love to, we just can't replicate what happens when we've got 5,000 people using it, and when we get 5, 6, 700 concurrent players going on it. And we need that. We need that ability to put something out there and to stress test stuff, and to see what happens, when we think we develop the greatest, gameplay economic loop, and then people get in it and they figure out how to exploit it, right, that we just didn't see. And so that's really kind of the, and I am gonna close the chat because I just cannot stop looking at it.
Not worry.
Yeah, so that's it. Public test realm, the idea that there's going to be this version of C4 that's still in test, it's still being built, it's not going to be bug free. It's even going to be somewhat, pre-alpha, but it's going to be there and people are going to be able to play it. And hopefully a lot of people do play it so that we can do that kind of stress testing, and that kind of game loop testing. So
Awesome. And what kind of gameplay loops can players expect in the PTR, Jim?
yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, like, C4 is kind of four main things, and again, forgive me if I'm a little unprepared for this, but I'm winging it today, guys.
Don't
And
worry,
gals
don't
out there.
worry.
Yeah. But
They are used it. They are used to
yeah,
this.
exactly. Yeah. So I ain't no polished speaker anyway. So combat, crafting, and then what are the other two C's are about, like,
Claim
your character
stakes,
claim stakes,
combat.
right? Claim stakes. Yep. And then the character progression, right? The council rank, I think, is what it's
Yes.
called. But yeah. So obviously, for those that have played Holosim, you got a real preview of combat, and the added gameplay dynamics that combat adds to the game, and how much, I mean, to me, how much more fun, another opportunity for fun, where it's not just a spreadsheet game about creating supply chains and mining and that kind of stuff. Now there's about, actually taking territory and trying to win and trying to take other star bases, and the joy of getting your team together and you getting your faction together and going, at one point in Holosim, right, like Mud was on the verge of absolute collapse because the other two had ganged up and had taken 80% of their territory or whatnot, right? So that kind of fun gameplay is what combat provides. And then the other pieces of it, the crafting habs, the crafting, and the council rank, kind of the character progression, like as we were talking about kind of in prep for this, as someone who's been in the games industry for 30 years, working in games, games are about choice, right? And what makes games fun is choices, and how many choices you can make, and what are the consequences of those choices, and figuring those things out. So the other ones really take the kind of supply chain empire management functionality of Star Atlas and just expand it incredibly, and just add so much more to the things you can do, instead of just building a fleet that's do I got some Pierces, and I've got it's got some air bikes, and I've got some tanker shit. I'm just kind of throwing stuff out there because I'm doing this by the
Mhm.
seat of my pants. Now you can get recipes, and those recipes allow you to build components, and components are going to let you augment your ships. And so you can min max a fleet that's got and again, you're probably not going to be able to just have a fleet that's just mining ships now, because there's combat. So you got to have fleets that are going to min max what fighters are there, and how they're supporting the mining ships that are on there, and you're going to have all of these different things that you can do that are just going to make the game so much more fun, in my opinion. And it's not just opinion. Again, like I said, we've added a lot of this kind of stuff to Holosim. We gave players more choices in Holosim because we're not focused on the economic loops. We just All we got was feedback in Holosim about how much fun that game was. And we want to kind of continue to expand on that.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting topic, Jim, because so far people have been experiencing or thinking that uh, Holocene is one thing and C4 is another. They don't communicate at all. Do you foresee or do you expect us to have features that comes from Holocene happening in C4?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think one of the things that you guys in the community know, Xcode, as kind of the director of Holosim, and then myself in my role, he and I meet every week, and we are absolutely putting a roadmap to bring. That was kind of some of the point of Holosim, is to be able to test these ideas where it doesn't have huge financial impact on people, and it's not necessarily economic driven. It's fun driven, right? And so yeah, we absolutely meet every week, and we're putting a roadmap of what things that Holosim is doing. And I don't want to spoil the fun of what's going to happen with chapter 2. So I'm not really going to say too much, but we're going to bring a lot of those things into C4. Maybe not day one, but they're definitely on the roadmap for C4 down the road. Again, in prep of talking about this, one of the things that I think um, added a lot of just kind of weirdly added a lot of value to HoloSim was the faction chat, right? And so, having that faction chat kind of built directly into the game, where faction members can coordinate, where people can get help, and they're not worried about getting a DM that's, I don't know if any of you are on the Zinc channel, right? But every 2 hours we're blasting the Zinc Discord with "don't take a DM because you're gonna get somebody trying to steal to scam you," right? So like having this kind of safe place in the game to communicate and to coordinate, and it just I wish like I could have Jindo up here, right? Because I know Jindo played a lot of Holosim. I also played a lot of Holosim. I just thought that was a really fun social feature. And so again, without getting too deep into some of the other things that Holosim is doing, um, but bringing that into C4, into the next real version of Sage, so that combat can be coordinated, and blockades can be coordinated, and people could do fun stuff like create an alt character that's in the different factions so they could try to get faction information, and like just all the things, all the social gameplay that came out of that. And
Something that we were discussing before we joined the stage was another aspect of Holocene that might make its way to C4. And you actually brought something, a really cool concept to me that I feel we should share with the community today about how quests could be implemented on C4, and maybe even at the PTR to start testing it. Can you talk a little bit about the ideas that we were discussing about how quests will make into C4?
Yeah. So again, like I thought one of the really powerful things that drove, and I can only speak in an American accent. You guys don't want to hear my British accent or any other kind of accent. It'd be maybe good comedy or whatever. But um, one of the things that w- again, looking at kind of the way a lot of games are measured is what they call 7-day and 30-day retention, right? How many people started the game and are still playing it 7 or 30 days later? And looking at the data, there was a massive correlation about the people that made it to those milestones, excuse me, being involved in the quests and being involved in the dailies, right? And so there's been again discussion. Maybe Wagner's going to get mad at me as I'm pulling back the veil on some of the internal discussions here around well, what if we had quests in C4 but they didn't directly lead to Atlas, they instead led to ZXP emissions in Zinc. So if you complete quests in C4 for kind of the fun of it, if you will, and for the engagement of it, and then your reward is in Zinc ZXP, right? And so those are some of the things that again, we've been discussing internally, and I don't have a deadline on when that would happen, or if that would even if it would happen. But those are the kinds of conversations that we're having. Like just um, not to segue into a completely different topic, but this is something that we talked about. What drives economy in games, right? And one of the things that being a longtime poker player, um, one of the things I think drives economy is fun. And the more we can make these games fun, hopefully the more casual players will want to play them. And the more casual players want to play them, the idea of rising tide rises all ships. The more the value of the Starless economy will be. And it won't just all necessarily be tokens, right? And emissions and ROI. There's a reason, in my opinion, that the global poker market is $60 billion a year, and it's not just because everybody's making money playing poker. It's because there's a fun and there's an enjoyment in playing poker that's driving that $60 billion a year market worldwide, right? And not to,
Yeah,
not to say that Star Atlas is going to be gambling. I don't mean that. I'm just, but if if our game is more fun, then hopefully more players play it and the economy rises. That's kind of the gist of what I was getting at. So.
yeah, exactly. And another very important thing that's going to happen at the same time, right, Jim, is that we are no longer creating this massive building, let's say, this new universe on Solana. We are building it on our own blockchain where transaction costs will be a lot smaller. The barriers to start playing Star Atlas investment wise, even on Sage, even on C4 level, are going to be, I mean, a lot smaller than they currently are. Like you'll be able to make money or at least break even with a single air bike. And this is something that's also game changing for a lot of players, especially people coming from third world countries like myself. I mean, when you have an air bike costing just a few bucks and you can just buy the basic resources for a few cents, you can actually have fun and enjoy the game without having to make like a $500 investment, etc. So if the game is fun and the conditions to join the game are also enabling for a lot of people, I think this is a good recipe for success overall, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, again, to maybe beat a dead horse with the poker analogy. Like if you had to get into poker and you had to buy in for $10,000, no new players would do it. And the fact that you can go and play a small 10 cent, 20 cent game allows people to get in and explore it and learn the fun. And we want to have that same experience. Again, hence HoloSim as a absolute zero cost. Option to get in and to learn and to play Star Atlas. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too, with Zinc, like you said, being able to control the costs better, right? That you know the last thing, and it was kind of horrible timing for Sage in a sense, but the last thing we want is a pump.fun run, right? And all of a sudden Solana tokens are going through the roof and transaction fees and there's priority fees, and all of a sudden it makes our game, we're competing for all those other resources on the Solana network. And so being able to run this in an SVM fork where we have more control, it just will allow for a better game experience and like I said, a more economical game experience as well. So.
Jim, going a little bit back to the PTR experience overall, do you feel we'll be able to start experimenting or experiencing the PTR already on the Zinc network? What are the current plans at this
Yeah,
stage, at
so
least?
yeah, so the current plan, so in terms of where we actually are in C4, so we don't say like, I'm air quoting, I don't have my video on it. I don't know if you want a video or not, but instead of saying soonish, ultimately, the full C4, oh, you turned on your
We
camera
can,
right now.
yeah, we can do, we can do.
I can pump my Star Atlas gear,
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so, and you guys can see my epic beard, though. Anyways, a
yeah.
light dad joke there.
Everyone has epic years now.
Yeah. So, all of the C4 functionalities, combat, crafting, habs, council rank, they're all happening. So all of the blockchain programs, and we talked about Starframe a bit in our prepped here, which you haven't talked there, but they're all running with our development tooling, meaning we're actually able to craft recipes. We're able to take those recipes and add them as components, and we're able to add those components to ships and creating a new composite ship, and then we're able to actually put that into combat. We're able to do all of those things, and we're doing them all on our internal Zinc, our Zinc dev nets and our local Zinc development environment, which we internally call Universe. um, we're all doing that right now inside of the Zinc world, from soup to nuts, right? Obviously, working through bugs and stuff. And so, the next phase that we're working on, now that we've got all of those systems working soup to nuts, we're taking, the Sage client, and we're refactoring the Sage client to now be connecting to those systems and now be using those systems. And there's obviously new UIs that need to be developed. And um, fortunately, you talk about sharing, for example, the lead UX designer of HoloSim, who came in a little bit later to HoloSim, is also working with the C4 team to say, okay, this is how we solved this information, we solved this UX workflow in HoloSim. This didn't work really great in the beginning, but we changed it to do this instead. So let's start from here and let's build that out, right? So um,
That actually touches on one question from the community, Jim.
sure.
C4 asked, is the C4 web interface something similar to Sage or something very different? Like, will players notice a different interface? What can you
Um,
leak to us here
Yeah,
today?
kind of leak. Yeah. So it's actually built on a I'll get somewhat technical for people, and I apologize. It's built on a different UI stack. We instead of using React, which is what the original Sage Labs and C4 and then even HoloSim was built on, we built it on top of SolidJS, and we did that because we have just noticed that some of the performance bottlenecks that we had to get over was based on some of the performance of how React was built with this virtual DOM. And obviously React 19 is a bit faster than that. But anyways, we went with SolidJS. The actual UX itself is still based on, again, kind of on that original Sage, so it'll feel familiar. It will feel familiar, but it is a different technology stack, and there's just a lot more now. So there's going to be a lot more screens. And again, also with having, Jeff, the UX designer, there's being more focus on making the information more intuitive, right? How do you get to something? Where, when you click on something, what happens, right? And I think we've also learned a lot in Holosim and and the original Sage. I don't know. This is one of my complaints about Holocim, and maybe the community feels the same. But sometimes when there's a lot of ships over a starbase in Holocim, you couldn't actually click on the starbase because there's ships, and you couldn't get through the ships, and you had to zoom and zoom and zoom, right? Like, so we're trying to solve some of that kind of stuff in both Holocim and if C4, and we're solving them in the same way. So the short answer to that is it will be very familiar. The goal is to make it more performant and to have a better, more intuitive experience, but still kind of follow that same familiar feel, right? Where, the Star Atlas is a triangle, and you got the different regions, and you got the different star bases, and ships are moving. It'll look that same way, but it will hopefully perform better and be more intuitive on how you get to stuff, right?
Awesome.
And yeah.
No, no, that's really cool. Jim, one thing that people have always been wondering is why creating C4 takes so long. Like it's a huge project. We had many things happening, and one of those is the as we were discussing before this brew is the necessity of us building the framework where we could have the things that we wanted, right?
Right.
Because Sage was built using the Anchor framework, and
Correct.
now we created something entirely new, which is called Starframe, that's able to support the grand vision or the systems that we need to deploy something as big as C4. Can you talk a little
Right.
bit about this? Explain to the audience what's Starframe, what's Anchor, and what they do and why they are necessary, etc.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it's just from a high level, and again, there's probably others out there that are Rust developers and Solana developers. Like I saw Donovan on here, T Donovan, who's one of our Starframe developers. That I'm gonna be really high level, and some of that high level may have somewhat inaccuracies, but it's there to get the point across, right? Um, and so ultimately, Anchor is a framework to build programs on a Solana, on an SVM, on the Solana virtual machine, right? And I don't know, for people who've been around in Solana for a long time, they used to say, hey, it's like chewing glass, right? It's a difficult SVM, it's a difficult virtual machine to program for. So Anchor kind of built as this kind of industry standard framework to build programs on there. And this is not a knock on the Anchor team at all. I think they did a really good job, but they were trying to solve a different domain. And as someone who's worked in the games industry for 30 years, but have also worked in kind of traditional business web apps, that kind of stuff, from iOS development, games are a lot more complex in their state. And they're also a lot more complex in their relationships, right? Um, and so the only thing I can think like that is retail is actually very similar to that. You think, but anyways,
Mhm.
I'll digress and stop that. But so ultimately, our use cases, our game stuff needed a lot more the ability to represent complex states in an easier, more straightforward fashion, right? And again, this isn't 100% accurate, but to kind of give it the help to get the point. If you've got an air bike, right, and you want to add an upgrade to it so that its laser is more powerful, its attack is more powerful, but it also going to make it a little bit slower, for example. With Anchor, we may not have to create a whole new NFT and then burn the own NFT. And again, if you have 5,000 different ship components that you can add to ships, think about how many NFT possibilities that is, right? And we'd have to mint for every single
Billions.
one of those
Yeah.
combinations, and that tree just becomes huge, right? Um, with being able to build with composability instead, which was what Starframe was designed from the beginning to do, the idea is that can be an air bike, and then you can add your components to it very easily, and we're not having to have this huge combination, and you can actually play and mix and match how you want to mix and match better, right? So by to do that, it really wasn't feasible with Anchor to do that. Um, and because it was designed for DeFi, it was designed for locking, it wasn't designed for games, and it
Mm.
el- and for the complex relationships that games make. Um, and so we had to build that and launch that. And I think there's probably people in the community who have, that it's open source and have been part of it. Again, to maybe peel back some of the some of the curtain. The lead developer of Starframe was actually poached by Solana Labs. They loved it so much, right? So and we had to do some stuff so that he could work with Starframe and he could work on Anchor 2.0, right? Because they looked at what we did and they said, wow, there's a lot of great stuff there. um, and so we had to do that, kind of long story short, which just created um, a lot of work to do, right? So that's one reason I think, C4 has been delayed, is kind of starting from ground up. I mentioned, SolidJS and rebuilding the UI from ground up to be more performant. And also, the kind of thorn in our side, maybe even a dirty word, this Starcom, right? And how do we keep up with all the transactions and all the instructions that are happening, um, in a way that to kind of peel back a little bit of the curtain, in a sense, like, when we did the first Galactic Marketplace launch, right? I mean, like Jacob and myself and Michael Liu, we were like literally contacting RPC providers. And at one point we had 96 different RPC servers running just to handle the Galactic Marketplace volume, right? Because RPC ultimately, again, it's built for its right solutions for what it's built for, but it's not really built for this long-term real-time gameplay mechanic. Right. And so when we were trying to do those with Galactic Marketplace, we really realized that, hey, and RPC's come a long way since then. The WebSocket stuff is better, but it's still not to that point, so we obviously built Starcom, right? And we did a first version of Starcom, and then we did a second version of Starcom. And I think, unfortunately, I think the second version of Starcom was somewhat of a disaster, right? I'll admit that, and the buck lies with me in a sense there. So I think it was a disaster, and so Starcom version 3, which by the way is what's powering all the Zinc interactions for people who have interacted with me in Zinc. um, we're learning from those lessons, and we've also had to build Starcom version 3, and we didn't want to launch C4 with a Starcom version 3 that was like we did with Starcom version 2 when we launched it, and it was super buggy and things were super bad. And unfortunately, like I said, I'll take full responsibility in a sense that people had to use Sly to go to RPC to use Sage to play Sage, right? That's a bad experience, and that's embarrassing for us as a development team. So we wanted to build some systems and build some things and take more time to be able to really test these things, right? And again, I'm hoping people are enjoying some of this behind the scenes curtain, right? But like with Zinc
Yeah,
interactions,
for
right?
sure.
So people who aren't familiar with Zinc, when you do things, most of you, there is a bug right now blocking some people, but when you do things in Sage, we get every instruction that was from the blockchain that happened in Sage, and then we take those instructions from the transaction blocks, and we basically push them to Zinc, and we give people ZXP rewards for that, right? And during the alpha season of Zinc, at one point, because of our code, there was a more than a million instruction backlog at one point, and it was because some of the code we had written that we thought would multi-thread didn't multi-thread correctly, right? And by doing that alpha season in Zinc and seeing that, we were able to fix that. And now Zinc, and again, Donovan Tanner, maybe he'll talk more about it if he's around. I don't know if he still is, but we haven't seen more than a 10 instruction backlog now for weeks. those are
This
the
is
kind of Yeah, those are the kind of things that just, again, that's why we need a PTR. We need hundreds of people playing this, right? We need to see this scale, because when you do it in less scale, it's very easy and it works great, but as it Moore's laws, as it expands, you start to see some of these challenges. And so those are some of the reasons, I hate to say it, that C4 has taken more time than we would have really liked. But to me, it's about learning from our mistakes and trying to do a better job.
No, that's all we can do at the end of the day, right? We learn with our mistakes, we move forward, we build better products, and as long as we have this mindset, I think things works out in the end. Jim, now I'm going to ask more PTR experience and focused question. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this question at this point, but something that people always ask me is, when the PTR starts, is everyone going to start from zero, or we are going to get like the fleets that we currently have on Sage to start testing the PTR?
Yeah. So my understanding, and again, the lead developer of C4 was DMing me before this, like, don't give away the secrets, like, don't say something, right? My understanding is that the PTR is going to be start from scratch, and that we're gonna, I believe we're gonna be doing airdrops to people, and they're gonna have this starting thing, and we're gonna let things people build up. That's my understanding.
Similar to
So
Holocene then, something
yeah,
similar to Holocene.
similar to Holosym, exactly. Yep.
That
And even be doing like maybe the somewhat similar to Holosym is doing in these kind of resets, these kind of like, okay, we've seen the economy to this point, but we really want to test what happens in economic gameplay loops for new members so kind of early game, right? And every MMO kind of has this problem, right? For people who played World of Warcraft or old school guys like me with EverQuest, like, what's the experience for people who have come into the game 2 years later when most people are at the end game experience, right? They're at the end game experience when we're at the, so how do we kind of test those gameplay mechanics? So that's my understanding. Again, I could be wrong, and it's subject to change, right? So
no, don't worry.
don't hunt me down like Santi and
Another question that people asked before, Jim, is about the content of the PTR. So, for example, will all the Cs of C4 be available at day one? Or we are going to test, for example, first the combat features and then claim stakes? Do you have any ideas on how do you want things to play out?
Yeah, the goal, goal, and I personally feel that we're well along that goal, is that all the features are out. So Danny and Chris and Chip and the people that were involved in the game design, I think did a really great job of building a interconnected system. Right. And as Holosym showed, we could do combat kind of outside of the other systems, right? We could do just combat with fleets and territory. But combat becomes even more interesting when you can when you get all these combat components and all these combat recipes so the goal, our goal is to launch with all of the fours, excuse me, all of the fours available from day one. Like I said, to kind of take back the curtain of where we are, like our development team right now is testing all fours in universe, in kind of the Atlas net environment. So it's not like one of them hasn't even been developed yet, right? They're all in development and testing right now.
This is super cool. Jim, one of our community members suggested that, what about at the start of the PTR season, you give us a big sum of fake Z Atlas and let us buy assets in the PTR. And then you have a huge variety of different operations because everyone will try to do something different. I think that's a cool idea.
I love that idea. Yeah, we should absolutely write that down and go
Yeah,
pitch it. I agree. I agree 100%.
guys, I see people asking for the code. I'll drop it in the chat right now. Give me a second. Here. Code for today, C4 PTR. Another thing that community is asking now, Jim, will C4 include automation functions like HoloSync and Sly offers?
Well, I don't know if I can give away some of this stuff. So everybody that played HoloSim saw that we started building an automation manager. And this is probably not a community. This is probably not a huge secret. Man, Xcode's he might be mad at me after hearing this, but we've actually in HoloSim we started partnering with Sly to build Sly into HoloSim directly. And
Really?
again, yeah, and that's again that's where we want to be part of the community, right? I mean, we love what they did, um and so I think the short answer with that is yes, that there, that there's this really interesting balance of automation. We've seen that the community really loves automation. Nobody wants to be doing again, games are about choices, but nobody wants to do an accounting simulator where they spend 8 hours being a real accountant, right? They want to speed things up and be able to take the grind part that they don't like and automate it, right? And supply chains and things like that are tools that can be automated. So we think it's a huge. I think it's a huge value to have those stuff. I love that teams like Sly and Adam and other went out there and did things that we weren't able to do. And so I think the short answer, I've rambled a bit. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out what to give away and what not to give away. But yes, I think there will be automation. Maybe not from the get-go in C4, like the PTR may not have it right out the gate. But again, like I've said in this, everything that HoloSim is doing and HoloSim is testing, we're learning from and we want to bring into the the actual Sage game. So
Man, what's the feature, Jim, from everything that's coming on C4 that you are most excited about personally?
yeah, I like combat the most. Just because I think combat is the most interesting and the most fun. And I'm as much as I love to be kind of like an empire builder that like builds my supply chains and sets up my fleets and rakes in money. I'm like I said, I'm a poker player. I love risk as well. And I love, the concept of, us as a faction getting together and we're gonna go try to break through the barricade and take, this MRZ star base, and we're going to try to, and we know that it's going to cripple that, and we're chatting. I mean, like, for guys like me who played EverQuest, like, sometimes getting the whole guild together to go do the boss raid was just as much fun as the boss raid itself, right? And so, I think that we've seen that in HoloSim. We've seen that kind of fun social collaboration happen. So that's what I'm also the most excited for personally.
Awesome. Yeah, no, this is extremely exciting. Like, I mean, and combat. This brings up another question. The combat that we'll see in C4, it's actually an improvement from the combat we have in Holosync right now, right, Jim? We'll see new things coming on C4 combat, correct?
Yeah, yes. There's still UX design that's going, but yeah, the team that built the combat in Holosim, the team then that refined the combat in Holosim, is ultimately that same team that's working on it in C4. Yeah, so it should be very similar. Um, and again, yes, maybe even be an improvement. Although I will say that I think some of the things that are happening in Holosym Combat for chapter, is it chapter 2, right? Chapter 2.
Mhm.
Some of that stuff is really cool. So but yeah, it'll be similar or better. Yeah.
Awesome. That's super cool. Uh, Another thing, Jim, and this is on me. You can talk about this if you want. If we get scolded by leaking this, something like this, you tell Michael it
they
was
were
my
they were
fault.
they were saying Santi would stop you from giving alpha. So I know the two of
Exactly.
us, we might have an emergency
Exactly.
call with Wagner later today. So if
Yeah,
this is my
exactly.
last one, you know why. Um,
Yeah.
so
But something that I really love about the new season that's coming, Holocene, is the PvE element, the NPCs, things like that. Can
yes.
we expect PvE elements coming in C4 as well?
I hate to give you the same answer I've got. Like, I think everything that's going on in Holosim should come to C4, right?
Sure.
Like I think that, right? You know what I mean? Now I'm not the economics team that has to balance the economy of that, you know, but I think, and again, I don't know what's been leaked in Holosim about the PVE, but I think the stuff that we did see in Holosim's chapter 1, where, you know, Xcode was creating fleets to go hunt down people that found exploits and were unbalancing the game, right? Instead of this concept of, oh, we'll just banhammer somebody, this idea of being able to use AI and to use internal tools to build policing fleets I just thought that was a really cool immersive experience. Obviously, if you were someone who found a banham and suddenly got attacked by a massive fleet, probably wasn't as fun. But from our standpoint, I thought it was pretty cool, right? So yeah, you know, and again, you know, I'm not Danny, I'm not the game designer, I'm not Chris, I'm not in charge of the economy. All I can say is kind of the things that I'm fighting for internally at Star Atlas is ultimately a game's value to me comes down to its entertainment, right? You know, the
Absolutely.
and the more entertaining we can make a game, the more valuable the economy is. And you know, this kind of illusion of being able to print value out of nowhere with a token it really existed because of the exuberance of crypto in 2020 and 2022 and 23, right? And now we need to make that really, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, not the position of Star Atlas. We need to transition this into a game that truly is fun for players, even if they're not making a ton of money, right? Even if they're not, but they're there and having fun. And the ones who really want to be in there deeply and really want to invest the time, they're the ones probably making the most profit, but everybody else is having fun, right? Um,
Exactly.
so
Exactly. It's just like Anthony is saying, fun and ownership is key.
right,
Like making money is everyone likes making money, of course, but the fun factor, I mean, you can't put one ahead of the other. Fun
right,
comes, fun exists, then value is generated, as you were saying, like, and once value is generated, people will start creating markets and then token prices start following that value generated.
right,
It you can't put one ahead of the other. Like it's trying to inverse logic. It won't work like that. And
right.
that's what we are currently doing, right? As you said something else when we were talking before this brew that I really like it, is that by creating Holocene, we learned that we could make a very fun on-chain game. Now
Right.
with C4, we are going to make a very fun game with a real economy working, right? I think that's the plan for C4, right?
Yeah, and I think it's super exciting for me. Yeah, absolutely. You know, absolutely. I think it's great.
Yeah, we are super excited. Guys, do you have questions for Jim? He is here with you now. He can talk about C4. He can talk about the Zinc integration. Anything you guys want to ask, now's the time. We have a few minutes to spare before this brews end. Use it wisely.
Boom! I love that. That's a great gift. Uh,
I see people asking about fleet command, Jim. I'm not sure if this is something that you can talk about or if it's another person expertise.
yeah, you know, my role. It's at can know basically, you know, other than I happen to be in some conversations because of my role, but in the end, no, my kind of domain is what we're doing on the web, you know, what we're doing with the Starcom world, you know, Sage, Holosim, and Starcom system, you know, the Unreal side, and what's going on there. I would just give people false information because I don't
Mm,
really know. So
okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. We are all very busy. We can't everyone be on top of everything. And Katir is asking, we will be able to redistribute consul rank perks, Jim, once the system works, on the PTR C4? And if yes, what's the cost? I think the cost part might be something more for Chris Katir, but it is on the design of C4 that when you advance Council XP ranks, you get points and you'll be able to allocate those points in different perks, right, Jim? And
Yes.
from what I have heard, it will be possible to reset those points and reallocate them, paying a fee. Is this still on the current plans? How things will play out?
Yeah, so I think there's some balancing going on in that, and some just again, when we have a game design document and then we get it into PTR and we see what it really feels like, there may be changes, right? So some of those really defined details, I've been told to kind of avoid a little bit because we want to get these things out, and again, we want to do. I think learning from our mistakes, we want to get these things into this PTR. We want to see how they react. Want to see how people enjoy them. If they add to game value, if they add to economic value, and then tweak, right? So I think we could probably answer that question closer to the PTR than I can right now.
Sure, that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Let me see. Can you change factions from Sage to C4? A community member is asking. That's a good question.
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer to that. That's getting a little bit more specific than I've gotten into with the C4, the C4 world. I I don't know. I have to say, I'm sorry. I don't really know that specific
That's okay.
detail. Um, and again, that would be something that we could begin to play with, if not, and see how that works, right? I mean, I know, there's some species-based rules around C4 in a sense, but why couldn't an ooster join the mud, right? Even though they are, you know,
Mm,
the robot android, you know what I mean? Like, why not? You know what I mean? Why couldn't people switch between them? Um, I don't see why not. I don't know if that it's been granularly down that deep into the design document. So
Jim, I know you can't give us dates. I know you can't give details,
sure.
but community is asking, what else is needed for C4, at least the PTR, to be released? Is there anything you can tell us on what is pending? Like, are we really close now? What can you give us in terms of impressions? Like,
Yeah.
and
Well, no,
I know it's hard. I know it's hard,
yeah,
but
yeah.
let your heart tell what
Yeah,
you feel. Share
yeah.
your feelings with us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully not be my last ever discussion with the community. I mean, I can tell you exactly where we're at, and the great work that our development team, like Yves and Tanner. I'm sorry, I just see his name, TT Donovan. I'm like Tanner and others. So basically, and this was something very similar that we did with actually Sage itself. Is we built this set of web tools that allow us to right now to reach out through an RPC, execute on-chain programs, get back the data through RPC, and we're able to do that through this web view. If you kind of think of it like a menu, like if you're going to play this game completely through a menu system, you can get recipes, you can craft components, you can craft ships, you can do combat, you can move through the council rank, that development isn't done and in testing phase, like it's in the polish phase of that. So the next step that we're actually working on right now, we're working on basically on two steps. We're taking that solid JS and we're making it, instead of in this kind of menu command debug view kind of thing where it's piecing showing every piece of information that the RPC gets back, so we can look at every piece and make sure that everything is working perfectly. Now we're putting it inside of the map view, and we're putting it, in the map view, and beginning to put, where and for people that have used that have played Holocene, like that player utility bar, right? So the player utility bar that can drive all kinds of how players interact with their inventory and with their fleets and with their components. They're all doing that, through that player. So that's the step we're working on right now. from a kind of front end game mechanic is taking everything we did in that, what we call internally the bug view, and we're getting it into the web view, the actual game view. The other piece that we're working on right now is the optimizations in the Starcom layer to allow the map view to drive, to allow for 10,000 and 20,000 fleets. So and the other thing that we're also doing, just kind of for everybody's edification, I guess, understanding, is that we're completely supporting RPC in all of in our web client. So if there's a bug with Starcom, if there's an issue with Starcom, there'll be a toggle. Click a toggle, you go to RPC, and you can play the game through RPC, right? But
That's awesome.
so like in Starcom, we built this basically what they call a it's kind of like an occ tree. It's a D tree that databases, and we're using specific databases that are already optimized for those to be able to do spatial queries, to be able to kind of optimize how we get data down to C3, so that we don't have an issue like we did last time where you have to basically disable sewing all fleets right out the gate. So all of that stuff is optimized and better. So that's actually what we're working on. I'm not going to give a date on when those things are hoping to be PTR ready, because then I think my development team might find me and kill me. So, um, so,
No,
but that's where we are actually at. I want to give people not just soonish. I want people to know exactly where we are at.
no,
So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's actually very helpful, Jim. Guys, any last questions before we close today's brew?
well, thanks, Bohemian. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Guys, doubles in the chat for Jim. He came here last minute. I told him, Jim, I need help. Let's talk C4. He jumped right in. He offered to be here with us on the brews from now on. So doubles in the chat for him. He's a Chad, and he'll be here with us every brew, talking about Star Atlas, talking about the products. And Jim, maybe next week we can talk about Zinc, right? Maybe have a brew focus on Zinc, where we are, the features that are coming. I think it's going to be super cool, super interesting for community.
absolutely. And one of the things I just want to say too, for the community, and I appreciate these very specific questions. Ultimately, one of the things I'm trying to help provide for the development team, and people who are in sync will notice this, trying to allow the developers to actually be the ones down in their building, and I'm trying to do kind of some of that more. So sometimes I'm not as close to the code and very specific feature sets. And so if you get an answer like I don't know, doesn't mean that Yves doesn't know, or Jerry doesn't know, or other developers who are working on Gareth, they may know those specific answers. I just don't happen to have them as the I don't. It makes me feel like I'm a boss when I'm really, I'm here to support web director, right? Like that's what I'm putting the plans together and enabling the development team to do the best job it can. So,
And you are doing a great job, Jim. Thank you very much, man. And thank you
yeah,
all for being here with us today. We
that
will keep our traditions of hosting the Atlas Brew weekly. Even though our dear Santi won't be here with us, he'll be with us in spirit. He'll be joining eventually, and the show must go on. Galia persists, Star Atlas thrives, and we're going to have a lot of fun with C4 and everything's coming this year. Thank you guys very much for being with us here
yeah. Thank you so
today.
much, and I appreciate the show of gratitude. Absolutely, thank you guys
No,
and
we
team.
love you, Jim. Everyone, have a nice week, and I'll see you guys tomorrow in the Lore Keepers. Make sure to join because I'll be sharing some of the backlog of things that I have been working on. All right. See you, everyone. Have a great week. Take care. Bye bye.